Hello and welcome back to today's yoga question. I'm Lizzie Lasater, and joining us from Sydney, Australia is Georgia Lloyd. Hi, Georgia.
Hi.
So she's got some great questions for us today about the body in restorative yoga. What have you got?
Okay, so I feel like this one you have to know it's coming because it would come to you 1,000 times. But yin yoga, it's very popular. So can you explain the difference for us millennials who don't know?
So yin yoga is a style of yoga where the poses are held longer and often using props. So I think that's maybe why, and it's a slower form of yoga than, let's say, vinyasa. So I think that's where the confusion kind of comes from, is that people conflate yin and restorative, or I've seen it on schedules, yin/restorative. So as yin has grown more popular, which I really celebrate because it's offering people an alternative speed for an asana practice. And I believe as yin becomes increasingly popular, restorative is sort of right behind. Yin is pulling us into the yoga studio world. But how I would describe it is that yin is still fundamentally using the sensation of a stretch as the focusing tool. So when we do a hip opening pose, and even if we stay for 5 minutes and we stay with our breath, I'm still fundamentally looking for a stretch. Does that make sense? Yeah. And in restorative yoga, I don't want you to feel any sensation of stretch.
Nothing.
Zero, which can be really shocking for people because we're used to on the yoga mat being uncomfortable. In fact, many of us associate, it's like yoga poses are supposed to be, slow, fast and uncomfortable. And restorative is slow and comfortable. So it's just almost, 180 degrees from what so many of us are used to. So the expectations are almost kind of working against us. But what I think becomes a little bit dangerous, to use a strong word, is that when we blur the line between yin and restorative, students and even teachers can conflate the two, and then in a restorative pose like Supta Baddha Konasana, they're still somehow searching for a stretch, the students themselves. So I want you to take enough props in a pose like that, lots of support under the legs, that your inner thighs are not experiencing any stretch, especially because in Supta Baddha Konasana, we're staying for 20 minutes, and 20 minutes is a really long time for a stretch. And that sensation in your inner thighs, your adductor muscles, if they're being stretched that whole time, you're going to be with that sensation. And I almost want to remove the sensations so that you can be with the mind. Does that make sense?
It makes a scary amount of sense. As a millennial, the trigger word of be with your mind. Are we ready for it? Yes, we are.
So I hear a baby crying. He's just woken. One of the babies has just woken up from their nap. So we're going to have to end it here. But I just want to remind everyone that, of course, there are some very beginning, we could say, or starter restorative poses, like if we take Uttanasana with blocks under the forehead or dog with blocks under the forehead. Of course, those poses are still going to have some sensation, very minimal. We stay for 1, 2, 3 minutes. But what I'm really talking about are the big, juicy restorative poses. It's about opening, not about stretching. And I would say that yin also has a component that's about opening, but there's still a deep component of stretching involved in the yin system. I think they're both, I think it's a valuable system. I think they can be combined really well, yin and restorative. I think vinyasa and restorative can be combined really well. But I just encourage teachers to make the distinction clear. So like, let's do 45 minutes of yin, and then now we're stepping into the second half of the class and we're doing restorative. Restorative feels different from yin because the teacher is talking less. There are fewer poses. We hold them longer. You're not stretching. There's more darkness. Almost always our eyes are covered. So these, you know, amongst other things, but those are the kind of core building blocks of restorative yoga. It's almost as if it's a different color. This is the analogy I sometimes say before we close, is like, you know, yin is blue and restorative is red. And I think those are great colors to put together, but please don't teach purple.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no combination.
Well, I just think you do both services, both systems a disservice. And restorative, one of my absolute, when I used to travel, I would pop into restorative classes around the world in whatever city I was, just on the schedule somewhere. And I would go take a restorative class to see what people were teaching. And often what I experienced was people teaching much closer to yin, but calling it restorative. That means in an hour class teaching 10 poses and 8 poses. And in an hour class, I would teach 2 or 3 poses if I were teaching restorative. So that's kind of the scale change that's different. And when someone is teaching 10 poses in an hour and calling it restorative, for me as a student, I get really frustrated because there is a lot of effort to build all the props. It's like, and then I just get here and I'm like trying to, and then they're like, ding, okay, now we're going to transition to, I'm like, no.
Yeah. It's painful to be part of. But that's where I guess as teachers and probably those starting out at restorative, it's us who has to get used to the silence so we can give it on to the students. It's not the other way around.
It's so insightful, Georgia. It's the teachers, it's us as the teachers that are uncomfortable. We're bored. We're sitting there and we're thinking, and we project it onto the students, oh, they must be bored. And that's why it is so imperative, if you want to teach restorative yoga, that you must practice restorative yoga. Because if you honestly do Shavasana every day in your life, or one 20-minute long restorative pose, Supta Baddha, supported reclining, Viparita, Shavasana, if you do something like this almost every day in your own life, you know that you're not bored. Like, you absolutely know that every time your timer goes off, you're like, oh, I could stay another 10 minutes.
Very opposite of bored.
You're the opposite of bored.
Yeah.
Georgia Lloyd.
See you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your curiosity. Sending lots of love to Sydney. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Too. I'll see you sometime, hopefully in the future, in real life.
All right. The website is lizzie.yoga, Lizzie. And you can jump on my Sunday, please jump on my Sunday Savasana Series newsletter. Bye, everyone.